Can I say a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining this live webinar and welcome to the great city of Derby. When I was interviewed to be Dean of Derby, which I am now, I was asked how I would feel moving from the coastal area of Northumberland into a place that was the very furthest you could get from the sea. So far, coping well. But Derby is in the very heart of England, and we're delighted to be able to share the Derby way, the Derby story so far in this live webinar. Now, this is a conversation between many people of different faith communities, and I think it would be very appropriate to open with a space for our own prayers. So I'm going to suggest we're silent just for 30 seconds, and each of us is free to pray in the silence of our hearts as we wish. And for those perhaps who choose not to pray, maybe that can be a time of reflection for us all. So let's just be quiet, and for those of us who are going to offer a prayer, let's commit this session and our learning and our conversations to Almighty God. So in a moment of quiet, let us pray. Amen. Well, here in Derby, we're very excited to be able to share our story with an invited audience. We're excited because in lots of ways, in every way really, the story is ongoing, it's unfinished, it's unpolished, it's unshaped at the moment. And it's a great privilege to be able to invite others into the room to listen in, to offer comment and help us shape the journey that we're on here in Derby. I'm really pleased to say that this afternoon is what you might call a co-production. There are a number of partners who've come together to offer this afternoon. First of all, the Multi-Faith Centre based at Derby University, the William Temple Foundation, Derby Cathedral, Community Action Derby, and the City of Derby itself, Derby City Council. And it's my opportunity to thank representatives of all those organisations and institutions for making today possible. The purpose of today is to unpack the principles on which a future relationship between faith communities and civil society can be constructed. We're going to explain to the invited audience the Derby way and very much in the context of the Keeping the Faith report. We're going to identify and make transparent the good, the bad and the ugly, as they might say, the good news and the things that we wish to learn from. We want to try and together understand the conditions through which local partnerships are strengthened and sustained, and particularly look at the relationship between local authority and faith communities and try and understand some of the principles of how that relationship can be developed in the future. We very much want to identify actions that delegates to this conversation can take back to their own environments, and that applies particularly to those of us here in Derby, but I do hope that it will be of use to those of you listening in and participating from outside the Derby context. And that's because we very much want today to contribute to the national conversation and learning about the developing of what you might call faith covenants, faith communities seeking to work together. So that's the purpose of today, and I'm confident that we will achieve those purposes, and thank you in anticipation for your parts in that. Just one or two housekeeping notices I've been asked to do to make sure I fulfill all righteousness. First of all, we will finish by 4 o'clock, and we will aim to have a short break a little after 3 p.m. For 5 minutes, which I think will be important to keep to. Please be aware that we are recording this session. I hope you've all been able to press that button in front of you, agreeing to that. If you're not able to take part, if we are recording, then I think the option we want to recommend is perhaps looking at the recording at another time. Our privacy notice is posted in the comments section. Please put yourself on mute if you're not actually speaking, and if you could limit distractions in your background so everyone can focus, we'd be very grateful to you. We are working to quite a tight timetable, so we apologise in advance if we have to move the conversation on at various points. So without further ado, I want to hand over to someone from the City of Derby. Sadly, Rachel North, the Deputy Chief Executive, is not able to join us this afternoon, but in her place we have Stephen Riley, who is the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources at Derby City, and we also have Maria Murphy, Managing Director of Derby Homes and Strategic Lead for a programme which will be explained at some point better together in Derby. So Maria's going to talk to us later on, and without further ado I want to hand over to Simon Riley. So Simon, there you are, Simon. Good to see you, and over to you for a sort of 5-minute introduction to the City of Derby.
Yes, so thank you, Peter. And it's almost like a Damascus Road experience of being called Stephen earlier and then rechristened Simon. First of all, can I say what a privilege it is to be invited to this event, as Peter has explained. I'm Simon Riley. I'm the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources and also the Council's Director of Finance, and I manage all of the supporting services of the Council, including how we plan the outcomes for the city. So we've got quite an exciting, in a sense, agenda that myself and Maria will be sharing. And I think, having read your Keeping the Faith report, and I just wish I'd been at that event, is that it's really crystallised the COVID pandemic and the importance of relationship and dialogue. It's really crystallised the approach that we'll be sharing and launching on behalf of the city. We want to be ambitious for Derby, but our vision is going to be ambitious for Derby, with the city, for the city. The days of the council being here as paternalistic or controlling actually doesn't meet modern society, is not relational, is not effective. So we're very keen that actually the narrative of what we are doing and how we work for the city, how we embrace the power of the faith communities. And I'm a man of faith, of a Christian faith, and I just love the quote in Hebrews: faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. And what we do, and your report talked about it, it's all based around love, and it's based around relations. And I think in our discussions today, and what Maria will be saying about our Better Together programme, I think that really has to be at the centre of modern city, the city that we're proud of. I was brought up in Warwickshire. I've come to Derby in the past 2 years, and I'm incredibly proud as I walk up from the station through Castlefield, not only of what we're doing economically, but the power of community. And if you haven't had a chance recently, there is a campaign that was launched yesterday. It's a campaign which is called We're Right Here, the Campaign for Community Power. And that's about unleashing the might of community power. Post-pandemic, we've seen what communities can do. We can see how working together, we can actually be a very powerful force for change, a really powerful change in not only of people's life outcomes, which is really important, but in terms of people's resilience, in terms of people supporting others in communities. And I would encourage you, there's a small 2-minute video. We're right here, the campaign for community power. That is incredible. It almost made me cry when I read it, because it's exactly what I want as a public servant, serving with people at Derby. So we're really excited about where we are as a city. We're going to talk about our Better Together theme, which is working collaboratively to make Derby the best it can be. And that isn't just a strap line, it's something we really believe in. And we are investing in a whole range of areas and unlocking the power of community. So, for example, the work that Paul Brookhouse has been doing in sort of the Food for Thought, the work with Community Action Derby, the work with Safe and Sound. I think all of you on this call can see that we are now embracing the community as the future, not the community as something we contract with in a very formal way. So we're excited about that. We want to embrace, if you want to call it, the longevity. And again, keeping the faith is that faith communities especially see things as a longer term ambition, a longer term goal, a longer term success criteria. And the council's in the same space. We're hearing from the medium to the long term. So thank you very much for your contributions. And I say that on behalf of the council, I say it on behalf of the council member, Matthew Eyre, who is here. Without you, we'd be a weaker city. So I could carry on for 2 hours, but Peter would shut me down. But can I really just encourage you to be ambitious for the city in this discussion? This is about a new partnership, a new working with the city, for the city, and together we will actually make this city a city to be proud of, and a city that has community strength at its centre. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to you, Peter.
Simon, thank you so much. That's a great start, and I just love ending with that sense of ambition, which as a newcomer to Derby, I'm certainly experiencing at the moment. And I'm sure we'll come back to those really interesting themes that you've put on the table so early for us. But I'm going to move on now to invite the Right Honourable Stephen Timms MP to speak to us. Stephen, we're deeply grateful to you for carving out some time in your diary. Stephen is the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Faith and Society, previously Financial Secretary to the Treasury and Cabinet member. And of course, we're deeply grateful, Stephen, for the Keeping the Faith report, which you commissioned in your role. So I'd like to invite you, please, to share some thoughts with us and join in the conversation at this early stage, probably recognising that you're not able to stay for the whole call. I mean, you're very welcome to, and please do if you can, but we realise that we are intruding on a very busy diary. But thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Peter, very much. Thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be able to meet everyone on the call in Derby this afternoon to talk a little bit about the work of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Faith and Society that you've mentioned, and about the Keeping the Faith report, which we published just over a year ago. So, as Peter said, we're a cross-party group of MPs. I'm a Labour MP, but our All-Party Group, as the name implies, has got members of all parties, and what we have in common is that we all want to celebrate the very positive contributions to communities being made right around the country by faith groups and faith-based organisations. We want to make those contributions better known, and where we can, we want to help remove the hurdles which sometimes stop them realising their full potential. The group was set up in 2012, and we started off with a series of meetings with faith-based organisations. One of the meetings was with groups dealing with welfare to work. Another was about health and well-being. One on work with young people, recognising that most youth work in Britain today is carried out by faith groups. And the last of them was with groups working on international aid. And it quickly became clear in those discussions that the groups very often had a problem with their local council. there was a sort of suspicion that faith groups were only really interested in trying to convert people, or that any service they provided would inevitably be biased in favour of their own members. And I think also, you know, in any case, from the perspective of a hard-pressed council officer, faith groups are quite difficult to work with. You know, if you work with one of them, are you going to offend all the others? The people involved, after all, are a bit odd. They all believe in God, and you know, isn't it much simpler not to get involved with any of them? But because of that thinking, I think, and perhaps I'm being a little bit unfair, but you know, as a result, communities are missing out on really valuable contributions that the groups could be making in their community. So we came up with the idea, and actually it was suggested by my colleague David Lammy, the new Shadow Foreign Secretary, the idea of a faith covenant, which sets out ground rules for cooperation between faith groups and local councils to make clear what each should expect of the other, in the hope of building up confidence and building up trust on both sides and supporting them to work together. So the first council to take up our idea and draw faith groups in its area together to sign up to the covenant was the City of Birmingham. That was in December 2014. That was a very good start for us. Since then, another dozen or so have signed up, covering between them, we think, about 10% of the UK population. And it's continuing to develop. Faith Action, the group secretariat, is increasingly drawing the different areas together to network and learn from each other. But as Simon said, I think the pandemic has really seen things move to a different level. And it came home to me that something unusual was going on the morning of Good Friday last year. So not long after the start of the lockdown, I was sitting at home and I had 2 emails from different constituents saying, I don't have enough food, what should I do? Now, we've all become very familiar with referring people to food banks over the last 10 years, but I knew they were all going to be shut over the Easter weekend. So I didn't know how to reply to those emails. But then I found an email from the Mayor of Newham. And that said, if you come across people without food over the holiday weekend, you should email the vicar of Ascension Church, Royal Docks, before 10 o'clock in the morning, for a food parcel to be delivered later that day. Well, I didn't have any better ideas, so I gave it a try, and both of my constituents got their food parcels later on that day. Now, my local council had never worked with faith groups like that before. It was clear that something pretty unusual was going on in my area, and it became apparent across the country as well. Councils have really had to depend on churches, on mosques, on temples and synagogues in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before, or certainly not for a very, very long time. And over the summer of last year, with support from the Sir Halley Stewart Trust, the Trustful Trust and the Good Faith Partnership, we commissioned Chris Baker, who's with us this afternoon, and his team at the Faiths and Civil Society Unit of Goldsmiths, University of London, to research these council faith group partnerships. The Keeping the Faith report was published last November. I do want to thank Chris, Professor Adam Dinham and Greg Smith, who's also on the call, and the research team who helped them for all the work that they did, and that the findings very strongly backed this anecdotal evidence that faith groups and faith-based organisations have been integral to the civil society response to the pandemic, opening up buildings, running food banks, sharing information, befriending, collecting, cooking and delivering food, providing volunteers. In February of this year, following publication of the report, I led an adjournment debate in the House of Commons on the basis of the report, and the minister who was there, Eddie Hughes, commended the report, and he said, and I quote, "It shone a bright light on what can be achieved locally between faith groups and local government, and shows what can happen when faith communities and local and national government can work together effectively." And then later on, after that debate, I met with Lord Stephen Greenhouse, who at that time held the faith brief at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and he particularly liked the report's proposal for a faith commissioner to promote and champion faith groups' collaboration with local authorities. This will be somebody within the government who had the remit of promoting and championing these collaborations. Now, the faiths group has been passed on to Kemi Badenoch in the most recent reshuffle, so we'll have to see whether she shares Lord Greenhalgh's enthusiasm for that post. There's also a review going on of how government should engage with faith groups. That's being undertaken by Colin Bloom. And I think his report may well have something to say about this as well. It was supposed to be published in the summer. We are still waiting for it. So we'll have to see where we end up with all of that. But in the meantime, I do very much welcome the announcement of the government's Faith New Deal pilot fund. That was launched in September. Faith groups were invited to apply for grants for projects to foster good relations within local communities. And Lord Greenhalgh wrote to me just before the launch that the findings from Keeping the Faith, quote, show that faith groups can provide innovative solutions to complex problems. He's absolutely right about that. And the department's press release announcing the launch of the fund also mentioned our report in explaining where the ideas for this fund had come from. I think probably everybody on this call is going to be familiar with the widely held view that religious faith is sort of on the way out, and that it's at best irrelevant or more likely harmful to community well-being. I think that view is profoundly wrong. I think it's now way out of date. And in fact, in modern Britain, religious faith is our best resource for bringing large numbers of people together and building the bonds between them. And in this still quite new decade, it has been the faith groups which uniquely have had both the motivation and the resources to support their communities in this extraordinarily challenging period. Those qualities have not been found on anything like a comparable scale anywhere else other than in the faith groups. And we really need to learn the lesson from that, recognize where the resources to change things for the better in our communities can be found in 2021, and enable faith groups and faith-based organizations to make their full contribution in the years ahead, which they haven't always been able to in the past. So I apologise that as Peter has hinted, I have to leave just before 3 p.m. But thank you very much for the chance to join you this afternoon. I do want to wish everybody involved in Derby great success as you reflect on these issues this afternoon and in the period ahead. If there's anything in the all-party group that we can do to help, or anything that I can do as chair, then we will be absolutely delighted to do so, and we shall be following your progress with great interest. Thank you very much indeed.
Stephen, how can we thank you? That's just a wonderful introduction to this conversation. Innovative solutions to complex problems, removing the barriers to greater flourishing and greater participation. And I'm so struck by that remark that religious faith offers the best resource for building bonds between people. And you've hit so many nails on the head in terms of our experience in Derby. And I'm sure that the material you've put on the table will help us to build the conversation. And can I say thank you on behalf of everybody on the call for all the work you do as an advocate of faith communities in government and in Parliament. It is very much appreciated, and it's no exaggeration to say that the Keeping the Faith report was an inspiration to the City of Derby this time last year as we began to work together. So thank you so much for your time. We're going to move on, and this is the time for me to just highlight one piece of work that we've done here in Derby. At the end of May, we held an online conversation with 60 or 70 participants to reflect on the City of Derby's faith communities' contributions during the COVID emergency. We discovered that there was huge energy for that conversation. People wanted to share their experiences in some depth, and we had, I think, 12 case studies presented. There was a real energy to continue to work together as faith communities and build partnerships, but also a real desire came through the conversation to build better and more effective partnerships with local authorities. The report was finalised about a month after the conversation, and you can find a full copy of the report if you wish to read it, and it is worth reading. And Jeff has just put the link up on the chat. So the conversation at the end of May was pivotal for us and was a real time to focus and distill themes and issues and agendas for the future. And we'll share more of those as we go through the programme. But we're now going to take a deep dive into two examples that were shared at that conference, exploring the really good things, but also exploring with you and sharing with you the things that we feel we've got to know and learn. There's going to be a focus on how Derby projects were able to succeed because of their partnerships with the public sector, and try and understand how disparate faith groups were able to join together to solve problems, innovative solutions to complex problems, as Stephen has said. So I'm going to introduce Jeff Sweeney to everybody. Jeff is director of the Multi-Faith Centre, which is an independent faith-based charity based at Derby University. So welcome, Jeff, and may I hand over to you, please.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome everybody. I'm going to give the very, very briefest overview of the work that we've done in Derby to this point. As Peter just said, in May, we co-produced an event called Keeping the Faith, which was inspired by the report that was published by the APPG. COVID, like many communities, has had a devastating impact on communities right through Derby and this region. And we were aware that there was lots of faith activism locally, really helping people at vulnerable times. But there wasn't enough known about it. There were some examples of good practice. There was lots of examples of faith communities working in silos and feeling as if they were working independently from each other. So our Keeping the Faith conference in May was very much an opportunity to do what Stephen's just said, to shine a light on faith contributions during the COVID emergency. And we heard from a huge range of interventions and different faiths and beliefs. We had Buddhists, we had Hindus, we had Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, all presenting contributions to agendas ranging from mental health and well-being, bereavement and burials, homelessness, supporting families, food distribution, asylum seekers and refugees, social isolation and loneliness. And we were left with a huge sort of recognition of the depth and breadth of faith contributions across the city that weren't perhaps getting the recognition that they deserved. We also used that conference as an opportunity to sort of reflect on some of the challenges. Stephen's alluded to some of those earlier on, but what we were left with was this sense of, well, how do you transition from just being part of an emergency response, and how do you transition to be part of the city's recovery? And this was in the context of a sense that there was limited faith infrastructure within the city in terms of limited connections and networks, not just within different faith denominations, but across all the faith communities within Derby. And there was also this sense of that somehow faith is a bit of a problem to deal with, either because of their social conservatism, or that they're wishing to convert people to their particular religion, but also a lack of confidence from faith communities in terms of engaging with local authorities, but also perhaps a lack of faith literacy from civil society in terms of their dealings with faith communities, and this sense that we're not an easy bunch to deal with. There isn't a ready-made, easy front door to faith communities that makes it easy currently to engage faith communities in civil society. So we also thought about, well, what were the things that would enable and facilitate more partnership and collaboration, and this sense around building and broadening strategic relationship structures and networks. And this is something that Derby City Council has really encouraged us to do over the last 12 to 18 months. We have created a place for faith within the city's partnership networks. We report through the Stronger Partnerships Board, and that embeds faith into so many different policy areas across the city. As a community, faith wanted to continue learning and being inspired from each other, both locally and nationally, hence today why we've organised this follow-up event. And this sense that they wanted to have a more visible, approachable and accessible sector, which really does require the sector coming together in all of its diversity to make it, to have those conversations, not just about the matters of shared concern, but also those matters that are perhaps the difficult things that need to be addressed to enable better partnership and across faith and with civil society. And the other important thing that we identified was that it's not just the people that sit around the table. It's really, really important that we have to ensure the broadest possible representation from all communities and engage those that aren't sitting around the table. And that kind of brings us to the point of what's the point of today. The outcomes from the Darby Keeping the Faith meeting was very much about a strong willingness to be active partners in the city recovery. It was hugely inspiring, and there's this huge will to keep the momentum going. And this willingness or this desire to organise and act strategically, but also a recognition that we're not quite there yet, that we might need some support in order to enable faith communities to contribute to their full potential. And also a recognition that we need to do more as faith communities to connect with each other and with civil society. And whilst there's a growing appreciation and sense of purpose amongst faith communities, more needs to be done to appreciate and communicate faith's unique offer across the different policy arenas within the city. But one of the positive things that emerged from the event was that conference mandated the setting up of a steering group to explore the development of a faith forum. So that group is meeting. It is developing the terms of reference for that group, and we are sort of encouraging more and more faith communities to come and join us and help shape what a faith forum or a faith alliance might look like. On behalf of the sector, we've also submitted a bid to the Faith New Deal Fund to help support the development of some of this work, and we wait eagerly for the outcome of that decision process. But today is very much about how we move beyond talking amongst ourselves and how we start having those conversations around creating the conditions for really effective partnership working with civil society. So I think that just about rounds off my few minutes. I'd like to sort of close there by introducing our colleagues from the Muslim Burial Council, Ijaz Sarwar and Asif, to give their presentation.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for the introduction. I'm just sharing the screen. Can everybody see that? Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So, assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you all. My name is Ijaz Sarwar, and today I'm representing the Darby Muslim Burial Council. Gosh, technology works brilliantly when it goes well, and when it doesn't, it doesn't. So apologies for that. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of an insight, The Derby Muslim Burial Council is a partnership of key Muslim organisations, and its role is to ensure that the needs of the Muslim community are met with regards to having dignified burial processes. Something which is quite important to the community, but more importantly, it's about the responsibility that comes with that. Just a little bit of an introduction, and just to keep people updated in a sense, is to say that, you know, Muslims are never buried, are always buried, but never cremated. And it is a religious requirement that the body is ritually draped before the burial, and the funeral should be conducted as soon as possible after death, preferably on the day or within the next day or so. And that is part and parcel of the cultural and the religious needs. So in a sense, the Derby Muslim Burial Council set itself up. So it is a charity, and it has been created with the values and teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah in mind. We as a community are very fortunate that we have people with a lot of experience, over 25 years of actual experience of supporting families during the bereavement processes. And something that is sometimes quite complex, it's sometimes very stressful, there are high levels of anxiety, but it's ensuring that the family are supported. And within the Muslim community, a burial is not just an individual family's responsibility. Friends, family, neighbours, the wider community also contribute towards that process and help out. So really the DMBC's aim was to provide support to the community to alleviate some of these stresses during a quite difficult time. The DMBC's vision is to ensure that the Muslim burial processes are conducted with dignity and in accordance with the faith, and also with the individual family wishes. And traditionally, some members of the family that passed away would like to be buried abroad, say in Pakistan, India, Iran, Iraq, etc. But at the same time, you know, it was the wish. It's not necessarily a religious requirement, but we just needed to make sure that we followed the faith and the wishes as well. The mission of the DMC is to provide respectable and affordable intimate services. And this is really important to meet the cultural, religious, economic, and social needs of Derby's Muslim community. So in a sense, the DMBC's role was really to deliver a caring service to all residents of Derby City. We needed to provide any bereaved family with burial advice, support, signposting information. And that's not only during the time of the bereavement, but also afterwards. There is also some background services in terms of support, counselling, etc., things to help the family cope during a very difficult time. One thing that was really also important was that there needed to be a strong partnership approach and a single voice between the community, between stakeholders such as Derby City Council Bereavement Services, the coroner, the bereavement office for the Royal Derby Hospital, the registrar for births and deaths, and other related organisations. We all have to work together to make sure that the process is done in a dignified manner. And it was really key that each stakeholder understood the needs and responsibilities on behalf of the community and what comes afterwards as well. At the same time, it's so important that we needed to educate the wider community with important practices and procedures for a burial. There are those that are very knowledgeable, but there are those that have had to face this for the first time. And it's ensuring that they understand what they need to do to make sure that the family needs are met. And again, you know, you've got to build on that. It's about educating the wider public with important practices and processes for burials. I think that was really key. But what is quite unique in a sense within the Muslim community is that there has to be a collaboration between the mosques, the funeral committees, and the funeral directors. Each plays such an important part. The mosques will open the doors to allow the congregation to come in and pay respect and do the prayers. The funeral committees is, again, a key part of this because it's almost a membership-based organisation where families within the city will pay a subscription cost. This helps to pay for the bereavement on behalf of the family. At the same time, the funeral directors are the actual individuals who help the process of taking the deceased from, say, the hospital to the graveyard as well. So they're all part and parcel of the process, but importantly, each has an important role to play. And so really the DMBC's approach to this was to act as a consultative body on issues relating to burial and bereavement. So I guess this was something to talk about how it happened. And when we look at the good, the bad and the ugly, the ugly side of it is we had to work together during the pandemic where there was a lot of anxiety, there was a lot of uncertainty, and people just needed answers. People just needed a little bit of reassurances. And at the same time, we had so many rules and regulations that we had to abide by. But it was important to pass these rules and regulations and spread the message in the communities so that we have that understanding, that willingness to work together. And more importantly, it was about building a relationship between the Derby City Council Bereavement Services, the Muslim community, and all parties involved, because it needed all of us to work together collectively to ensure that it's done in a dignified way. And I'm really pleased and proud to say that, we really have a good collaborative approach. Originally, it started off quite tense. There was some uncertainty, there was lots of rules and regulations, but by consulting with members in the community, by consulting with key individuals and volunteers, it was really, really important to ensure that we all took that collective approach, have a single voice, but at the same time, have an understanding of how things need to work together. And at the end of the day, we have such a valuable resource within the City Council and the cemeteries, which is something that's part and parcel of some of this. And for me, I felt it was really important that we try to work together on that. So I've tried to summarize that, keep it as concise as possible, but I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Oh, sorry, Jazz.
Yeah, sorry. I hope that's helped everybody.
Thank you, Ijaz. I mean, it's really impressive work in the sense that the Muslim Burial Council did not exist pre-COVID, and it was very much a response to emergency. But one thing that your presentation did was underline the importance of dialogue in working through uncertainty and creating something that is much stronger and has longevity beyond that initial sort of emergency period. So thank you very much for your presentation and taking the time to share it with us. We're going to move on now to our next presenters, and I'm going to introduce Paul Brookhouse and Guy Freeman from the Derby Food for Thought Alliance, who are sharing their screens now. Over to you guys.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Jeff. My name is Guy Freeman from the British Red Cross Refugee Support Service in Derby. And at the start of the pandemic all those months ago, an alliance of organisations was set up to provide food to people who needed it in Derby. And this alliance is called the Derby Food for Thought Alliance, as it says on the slide. And I'm going to provide a very brief background to the Alliance and how it was set up. And then I'll hand over to Paul Brookhouse from Community Action Derby, who will be discussing what has been achieved, and he'll also review the reasons for the success of the project, but also describe some of the challenges that still remain, and also talk about how we're moving from a crisis response organisation to what's now known as the new normal. So first of all, the setting up of the Alliance. This slide summarises 5 key topics that were crucial for the success and providing the foundations for setting up the Alliance right at the start. So point number 1 there, it says foundations were already in place. What is meant by that is that prior to COVID coming along, we already have a very effective network of organisations who were distributing food through food banks to a number of different organisations and groups of people in the city. That was a very informal network, but it did mean that there was already very strong organisational relationships, and also, more importantly, strong personal relationships between different people from different organisations in the city. And that links, I think, directly back to what Simon Riley said right at the start in the introduction about a lot of this is down to personal relationships. I think Simon used the word love, I think, right at the start there. So that really links in with that. But we already have that foundation in place. And then we move to the lockdown, step 2, where we, within 2 or 3 days of the first lockdown, we moved from the informal relationships and informal cooperation that we had in place to formal arrangements and partnerships between a number of organisations in the city who are involved in collecting and then distributing food. And the crisis that we found ourselves in allowed us to take what I put on the slide there, a focused approach. A less a diplomatic term for that might be autocratic approach, but we were able to achieve things far more quickly because of the crisis that we found ourselves in. And then at step 3, we set up the Alliance and all the processes that we needed to have in place to collect and distribute food. So we had a single point of access for people to be referred for food. We had very regular communications of how to access that single point of access, and that goes back to the organisational relationships that we had right at the start. We already had those contacts and those distribution lists in place. We had then also very simple criteria for who was eligible for the food to be provided to them. We had a single central collection and storage point for food donations, but we had multiple distribution points for the food, and there was a very diverse set of organisations involved in the whole setup of the Alliance that are listed there, some of the examples. And then the 4th point was that we also had a lot of resource available to us right at the start. We had a huge volunteer recruitment campaign, and there was no shortage of volunteers to provide support to us. There was funding available, and there was a significant amount of food donations available to us as well. And then finally, point 5 was, I think, very important. The whole of the Alliance, there was an independent coordination team. So when I say that, the team who were coordinating the whole project, they were independent of the local authority, and they were also independent of the individual food distribution points as well. So they didn't have, they weren't aligned to any individual food bank or organisation like that, that did give them a certain level of independence. And so we'll now go on to talk about how what we achieved during that project. And so I'll now hand over to Paul to cover that. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Guy. Yeah, so on this slide, I'm not going to go through them all now, but you can see on the screen the inputs. There's some very large figures there, not only financial resource, but in terms of distribution of items, but also over 1,000 volunteers. And I think one of the key things we have to recognize achievement-wise is that often a lot of resources thrown at dealing with consequences, and not always the same amount of resources put into addressing the root cause and prevention. And I think one of the key inputs here was around that there was that resource that was put in, not just financially, but also physically, and with the people there. And it was just amazing to see how people have come together through the work that was done. And in terms of outputs, people might think the first one is kind of an obvious one, but getting 11 food banks working together with the same offer, might seem a simple thing to do, but there's often a lot of challenges because everybody has their own way of working, and everybody, kind of has their own, systems of doing things. To be able to transition from food banks to opening community shops, which are more focused about dignity, about choice, about addressing food waste, and also having the package around it, is a great achievement. The sustainable food charter for the city, addressing all the issues around food isn't just about food insecurity. It includes the impact on the environment. It does include, kind of knowledge and education and support for individuals. The simple thing around free school meal vouchers, fails to recognise at times in the arguments one simple thing, that not everybody has the ability to cook, and we need to make sure that we support in a multifaceted approach and not just a singular way, which is what the charter is about. But the biggest one and the crucial one for me is about focus being taken away from food and onto people, and addressing the root causes of why people are in food insecurities and the situations they're in. And I think one of the big achievements is the establishment of the Poverty Truth Commission in the city that is slowly evolving and developing. Guy, the next one, please. And then successes and challenges that we just wanted to highlight. Reasons for the success, as Guy has already said, there was already some foundations in place. It's a lot easier when there's already some existing things going on and relationships going on to make things happen quickly. The coordinating of it all was, as Guy said, was independent. Quite often, I've now been here in the city 19 years, quite often one sector of the city has controlled many things that we do and expect everybody to work in the same way, whereas this one was very much about that independence. The funding of the infrastructure as well as projects is vastly important. We were given various amounts of money to spend on food. I remember we had to spend £250,000 in 4 months, which people might think is a nice thing to have to do, but it's probably one of the most stressful things that I've had to do around it. But we've been able to put the infrastructure for long term in it and not just focus about COVID. Understanding motivations of organisations, individuals. A key success, because every individual, every organisation, whether it's a public sector, whether it's private, whether it's faith, whether it's voluntary, whether it's business sector, everybody has a motive and everybody, has a particular a way of wanting to do things or a reason for that. And it's really important that early on we understood people's motivations so that we could genuinely work together and not just kind of pretend to, listen and then sidetrack and do our own thing anyway. Addressing the root causes as well as the symptoms, it's been a major thing that we've been able to shift, to actually look at some of those long term, and we've got endless stories of people who are, thankfully coming through because of working in partnership to address that. The cross-sector endorsement, I think that has been one of the biggest things for me to see in the city. As I said, I've been here 19 years, and quite often it's been very challenging to get all sectors to work together. Whereas I think this, during the pandemic and specifically with Food for Thought, there was that genuineness of everybody coming together, and it was kind of a breath of fresh air in that. And the delegation from local authority to the voluntary sector, to take the lead, that doesn't always happen in the city over my experience in the 19 years. And I think Rachel North played a key role within that alongside other people. She hates me saying that, but I think she has been a breath of fresh air to the city. And I think it's been that important that there was that recognition that the voluntary sector was better placed to take the lead on this rather than the authority itself. Two challenges we wanted to highlight: data sharing. It's almost become a swear word because even now we have still not resolved that issue kind of 18 months down, well, 20 months down the line. We're almost there, but it is key to us working together. But often so many problems get thrown up on it, which actually stop us being able to achieve the long-term goals that we try and do. And although we put it as a success, obviously a challenge, again, is understanding people's motivations of the organizations and individuals, because as we said, as part of the success, it's important that we recognize this, and it's a very challenging thing because there's many phone calls. I remember in my first week within the role of just trying to understand what my role was, various phone calls of people, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why is this? Why is that? It was about us all understanding that so we can recognize that actually the motive is about doing the best for the residents of the city rather than the best for organizations or anybody else. And so that was really important there. And I recognize that as someone myself, as a person of faith, it's easy for the faith sector to be skeptical about, other sectors, and it's easy for the sectors to be to have some cynicism towards the faith sector. And so it's really important that that happens. And that was a key thing, for us. And then the last slide is just simply one just to say, obviously we've whistled through that. We've got a whole project plan, lots going on that's more than just about food, but obviously we can't talk about that now. And so these are some of our details if you don't currently know how to get hold of us. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Thank you, Guy, and thank you again, Ijaz. Two very powerful, lively and thought-provoking conversations. Unfinished work, but very much part of the Derby story, the Derby way. Thank you very much to our presenters. Now I'm going to invite Maria Murphy, who I've already introduced as the Managing Director of Derby Homes and Strategic Lead for the Better Together programme in the partnership environment here in Derby City. We're going to hear from Maria for 5 minutes or so, and then I'll thank Maria, and then we'll go off and have a 5-minute screen break. And after the screen break, we'll invite Professor Chris Baker to address us. Maria, I can't see you on my screen, but I know you're there somewhere.
I'm
Welcome,
here.
and thank you very much for coming and joining us.
No, thank you, Peter. Well, today I'm here really demonstrating partnership in action, because I'm not here for Derby Homes. I'm here to talk to you about facing the challenges and being better together. And as Peter said, I am the strategic lead working alongside Rachel North. And yep, I'll try and take you through it in 5 minutes. So I don't know who's got my screen, but if we can move it on. There we go, a quick summary of the challenges that we face, not just in our city, but in cities everywhere. Challenges of isolation, of climate change, probably the one that a lot of people on this call know me best for is challenges around homelessness and rough sleeping. But we've also got challenges around technology. And we've certainly embraced a lot of those in the last 2 years. We shall not mention the box in the middle, because we all know, in a way, the pandemic, I think, has been an opportunity for us. So I'm not going to look at it just as a challenge. I think it is an opportunity. But another serious challenge that we have is the decline of our community high streets. And all of these things are people that all of us on this call, I think in some way, shape or form, are committed to improving for our city. If we can move to the next one. This is really what I'm here to talk about, and this is what I believe in. I actually believe that the best chance that we have as a group of individuals is coming together and developing that collective resilience. Wherever we come from is irrelevant. It's where we're aiming to go. And I'm really excited for the opportunity that we all have to change the way that we do things. And I think that everybody on this afternoon's session has got something in common, because we've all got shared values and shared passions and that really important shared ambition for Derby and for the people that live here. So I think we are well on the way to starting to move things forward. If we move to the next slide, please. I just thought it would be helpful. We've heard a lot of words already this afternoon, but for me, visuals say so much. And there are just 5 images of what being better together is. None of these programs, none of this support, none of this assistance could ever have been delivered by any one single organization, one single group, or one single body. We collectively achieved all of this by working together. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one here this afternoon that's proud of it. And I do think that you should all take a moment and actually pat yourselves on the back, because it's been a phenomenal achievement. But moving on to the next slide, this is what we have absolutely got to commit ourselves to getting rid of. And that's what we have, lots of silos. And the one thing I think is going to be the biggest challenge that we have now, as we move into what we're calling the new normal, which I must say is a little bit frightening at the moment, but there we are. The new normal can't be tainted by us slipping back. And I know that I've seen it many times that we've been committed to doing things differently, to working with people rather than doing things to them. But this time it has to be different. We cannot slip back into our old ways of working. And this is about changing culture, not just structures and frameworks, but changing the whole culture of how we work together. Thanks, James. If we can move it on. I apologise for those of you that have seen this image a lot of times, but I don't think it does any harm to keep reminding ourselves, because from a citizen's point of view, and indeed, I dare say from many of us on the call this afternoon, our systems look like a tangled bunch of wires. Where do I go? Who can help me? It's confusing, and we need to do something about this. I also think that our current system is very fragile, and it's fragile because of the way that we have lots and lots and lots of organizations and bodies trying to stand alone, when actually by bringing it together, not only is it simpler for our citizens, becomes more accessible, it actually becomes more sustainable as well. And the next slide just demonstrates quite simply that if we start to knit all of our different strands together, we become stronger. And as a consequence, our city and our people become stronger. Now, I think I have done an absolute marathon sprint job. And I think the next one is possibly my last slide. It is. Now, hashtag Team Darby is a vision. It's our city partnership. And I've bullet pointed there well, the bodies that we think we need to actually make this vision a reality. Our public services, yes, we have a role and we need to be in this partnership, but we have got to learn lessons. It is not about leading everything. It's about working with businesses. It's about working with voluntary organisations, cultural institutions, and faith communities, because yes, it makes us stronger, but it also means that we identify the right places to lead the right things. And in a very, very quick tour, that is better together, all leading to hopefully creating Team Darby. And I would be happy to talk to any of you for as long as you've got on this subject, because I hope that I've demonstrated we really are committed to making this work. Thank you.
Maria, thank you so much. And what a great place to end this first part of the webinar with all those provocative images. And we're grateful to you, Maria, and we're going to hear from you later on as we reflect on our breakout conversations. Okay, well, welcome back to everyone. And I want now to welcome Chris Baker. Chris, who I've known and worked with for many years, is Research Director at the William Temple Foundation and is also the William Temple Professor of Religion and Public Life at Goldsmiths College. Chris, thank you for being with us this afternoon, and we're very much looking forward to some reflections from you just to help us on our way as we go into breakout rooms in a few moments. So Chris, can I hand over to you, please?
Thanks, Peter, very much. And it's great to be with you. And I'm so pleased that the report has kind of landed with Darby and indeed lots of other places. It was a great privilege to begin to unravel and unpack some of the experiences of the partnerships that developed during the first wave of the pandemic. So I'm just going to, as a way of kind of introducing some of the things that I might want to leave with you as you go into the focus groups. Just going to share the screen and call up the report, elements of it. So the report that Stephen Timms alluded to, and which I hope some of you have read, and I'm wondering, Tim, if we can put it in the chat box whilst I'm talking, the link to it, was Keeping the Faith, Partnerships between Faith Groups and Local Authorities During and Beyond the Pandemic. And basically, we did the research in the summer of last year. We approached all 408 local authorities in the UK, and we got responses from 194, so just under 50% of them. We also did 55 interviews with local authority leaders and faith group leaders across the UK to kind of substantiate some of the findings from the survey. And the purpose of the survey originally was really to do two things. One was to measure the quantity of pandemic response work undertaken by local authorities and faith-based organisations. So had the pandemic in some way increased the quantity of the work that was done? But we didn't want to just record the quantity, we also wanted to record the experience. So had the experience of working in partnership during the pandemic between faith groups and local authorities, had that changed the relationship in any way between faith groups and local authorities, or had the crisis simply consolidated existing ways of working and understanding? So that was kind of the question that we had at the back of the report as we were doing it. So some very headline figures to answer the first question about quantity. 67% of local authorities reported an increase in partnership working since the pandemic started. And in terms of the experience of that partnership working, 91% of local authorities said their experience of pandemic partnership working with faith groups was either very positive or mostly positive. So that was a really encouraging figure. But just to put a bit more detail on the nature of that experience, when we asked local authorities what characterized their experience most of working with faith groups, we were very pleasantly surprised to see the top 5 were really positive activities and kind of resources that faith groups bring. So the top one there, 88% of local authorities said that adding value due to long-standing presence in local community characterized their experience of working with faith groups. 78% said acting as a source of local leadership, which I think is an interesting idea, characterized their experience to a great extent or some extent. And 62% said articulating and promoting social transformation. For this, I should say that for this particular part of the report, we kind of put 20 items together. We mixed them all up. Some were positive, some were negative, you might say, all based on previous research on partnership working between local authorities and faith groups. And then at the bottom 5, only 3% of local authorities said that the possibility of proselytization or the fear of proselytization characterized their experience of working with faith groups to a great or some extent. And there are some other kind of what you might call standard concerns that often policymakers have with working with faith groups that Stephen alluded to in his opening remarks. But actually what this is suggesting, this slide, is that there's a considerable softening of what were maybe quite fearful and suspicious attitudes in the past from a secular policy world towards the desirability of working with religion and faith. So a few years ago, I think you would have seen those last 5 much higher up the list. But I think that first of all, the experience of working through austerity, which we're still going through, of course, but now the pandemic has normalized and familiarized the idea of partnering with faith communities to such an extent that these issues are nowhere near as toxic as they once were. So that's a hopeful sign going forward, which I think very much emphasizes and reinforces what other people have said. Just a very quick slide there about the reliance on resources that local authorities had in response to COVID in the first 6 months, i.e. meeting the demands of poverty and hunger. Again, Stephen alluded to this in his opening remarks. And 66%, for example, of local authorities said they relied heavily on faith-based organisations and sharing information with their neighbours. 60% said they used food banks that were operated by faith groups, and so on. Moving from the past to the future, one of the questions that we asked local authorities, which I think is a key question, is if you have developed new partnerships with faith groups during the pandemic, do you expect these to continue when the pandemic subsides? And 76% of the 194 local authorities who responded to our survey said yes, they expected it to continue. And in fact, the majority of those said they hoped it would continue in a changed form, i.e. a kind of more, sort of a better type of partnership. And when we asked for some ideas of what that would look like going forward, those 76% of local authorities who said they'd like to continue to develop the partnerships that have been grown during the pandemic, the first phase of the pandemic. Again, we came up with a list of 20 variables, 20 ideas, and these were the top 5. So 97% of local authorities said it was very important or important to them to work together with faith groups to raise awareness of issues of food justice and poverty. And it's just worth pausing on that in the light of what Maria said, because, and indeed other people have said, this idea of the importance of shared values and finding shared values as the basis of moving forward into a new phase of partnership. And it's clear there that there is a lot of shared values around poverty and justice, in particular social justice. So promoting ideas of social justice and putting them into practice. 83% of local authorities said they would value increased resources to develop partnership working. And maybe that's a point that we need to put back to Stephen. Is there somebody in government who could really push that agenda forward? And I think finally, well, 83% also said they would value safe spaces for honest discussion about religion and belief. So again, going back to what a lot of people have said about creating trust through understanding motivations that we all have for the common goal of, in your case, making Derby a better place to live. So I'm coming to the end of this. So the three, when you put the data together, the survey and the interviews, a really nice clear pattern emerged of what people valued about the pandemic. And given that so much of it was awful, we have also said that opportunities have arisen. And there were 3 kind of areas where people felt they wanted to commit to improving coming out of the pandemic and moving on into the future. So there was a strong commitment to relationship building, which involved understanding and exploring further a more honest and authentic relationship building than has occurred perhaps in the past. a commitment to share resources and innovation. So there was a very much, as we've said already, the pandemic was a game changer. So there's been a renewed appreciation and understanding of the resources and innovation that faith groups bring to the pandemic response, and a commitment to share that in the future. And then vision and strategy, a commitment to a more active co-production model of partnership that focuses on shared visions for improvement and strategies to fulfill them. So I think what this report shows is some really interesting new areas for conversation and development around these kind of issues that came up. A real clear commitment to wanting to be much more egalitarian and treat each other as equal partners. In the past, the old normal, as we might have said, would have been very much the local authority or the council being the expert, having all the resources, and dispensing and dispersing those resources as they saw fit. As Maria said, that model is now bust. If we're going to create truly resilient communities going forward, there needs to be a much more egalitarian idea of partnership and a sharing of resources. And I'd just like to finish with a final slide, which was, I thought, a key quote that emerged from the interviews that we did as part of the original report. And this comes from a local authority interviewee. And she said, reflecting on, and it was a she, reflecting on the experience of the first 6 months, we realized that no one organization could get us out of it. Not one part of the system could help turn the tidal wave of needs. We needed to work together. And in order to be able to work together, we realized we'd have to pull down the fences and build bridges. Whether they'll blow out the bridges and put back up fences is yet to be seen. I very much hope and expect actually that won't be the case, and that bridges will continue to be built. Thank you, Peter, very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Inspiring, but also very challenging at the same time. And thank you, Chris, on behalf of us all, for the quality of the research in Keeping the Faith, which has been a real stimulus to our work here in Derby, and I know will endure because it's based on such good analysis. So thank you. We're going to move into breakout groups now, and Tim, in a moment, Tim, will work the magic, and there should be 6 or 7 of us in each group. Each group has a chair and a facilitator, one person, and there are 7 groups. The group facilitators will arrange for their conversation to be recorded within the groups, and they've all got instructions on how to do that. Jeff should have just put up in the chat, here we are, the questions we want to consider. Don't be alarmed, because there are 4 questions there, but you're not going to be required to address all 4, not least of all because we've only got 10 minutes in our breakout groups before we come back for a final plenary. But I would ask that all groups start off with question 1. What are your reflections and observations on the Derby Way? And there's probably time for each person just to make one contribution on that. And then could I ask that groups 1 and 4 tackle question 2 on conditions, that groups 2 and 5 tackle question 3 on barriers and obstacles, and that groups 3, 6 and 7 tackle question 4. And we'd like each group to report back, but each group will only have 30 seconds to do that. And we really would like the facilitator or someone else who's nominated to do it on behalf of the groups to come back simply with a headline sentence which gives us an indication of the really key issue that began to bubble up in your conversation. The group facilitators will take notes. We're recording it, so we'll capture all the comments, but we just want from each group one sentence which just gives a highlight of your discussion, the thing that's just emerging as you let the conversation unfold. And when we come back together in groups, together in the big group, we'll feed back, and then we'll invite conversations with some of our presenters to finish our afternoon. So everyone, I hope that's clear. We'll start the timing in the groups when we get there. So Tim, could I invite you please to put us into our groups? So we've just come out of breakout rooms, and we're going to now invite each breakout room to offer a 30-second sort of indicative statement of the exciting thing that came across during your conversation. And when we've done that, we're then going to ask the question, so what next? And what we'd like to invite the whole group to do, and I'm giving you a heads up on this so you can think about it in the next few moments, is offer some pledges. What difference is this conversation that we've had this afternoon going to make? Not just here in Derby as a result of our dialogue with others, but much wider as well. And we're going to invite you to put those in the chat when we get to that point. So we'll have quick feedback from the groups, and then I'm going to invite Rashita, Maria, Chris, and Simon just to offer some reflections on what they've heard to help stimulate our discussion. But first of all, let's hear from the groups, and there'll be no surprise because I'm going to take them in group order. So first of all, Pamela Thompson. Are you there, Pamela?
I certainly am, thank you.
Oh, there you are, Pamela. Good.
Thank you very much.
First.
In terms of, let me see, we're doing the first question first, are we? Your reflections on and observations on the Derby way. So the great catchphrase is the better together, and that has been loved and appreciated and embraced by the groups. It's seen that we've had to have a crisis in order to enable us, as Guy said, to oil the wheels in order to operate together best. And going forward, we need to embrace the relationships that already exist. So what we need to do, and let me, because I've only got 30 seconds, let me summarize and say that working together, better joining our energies, building the trust, and stop using sticking plasters. Let's move forward in a coordinated fashion without overthinking the process, because when we've had a crisis, we've not had time to think about it. We've just gone on and done it. So the expertise already exists. So let us continue in doing what we are doing, galvanizing the energies, working together. We are stronger, better together. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Pamela. That's super. Over to Shane Barley.
Okay, we had a very quick discussion, and I'll just follow on from what Pam was saying. Don't want to repeat what she said. The big concern we have is what's going to happen in April with the budget cuts. That's a big worry. Are we going to go back into silos? Are we going to maintain our momentum into keeping the changes in place? I mean, who's going to do that? With the Derby way, what's the cherry on the top? That's a big question. We've heard what the people have done, but how can we polish it off to be at the top? We definitely need to celebrate the positives that have come through and maintain them and keep them, but who is going to do that as well? I suppose is to protect the shaky bridges and keep those to stop them crumbling. That's going to be a big ask by everyone. We've got all the networks, we've got all the groups. We need to keep them sticking together. That's it.
Thank you, Shane. That's brilliant. James Duffield.
Thank you. So on the first question, I think I'll summarise it as saying we need to secure and safeguard this approach that we've taken, that maybe this is more of a nationwide approach and not necessarily the Derby way. There are other areas doing this, and perhaps we would be better framing it as the community way. And then the second question, so we were looking at principles. We might not have got as far in the conversation as nailing down principles, but I think the overall kind of consensus was not to overcomplicate this. Faith in action is about a set of values rather than necessarily religious action, and therefore with it being framed around values, that should create an easier dialogue between faith communities, voluntary sector and the public sector.
Thank you, James. Group 4, that's Carl Tring-Willis.
Hi guys.
Hi, Carl.
I was really lucky because I got Chris Poulter on my group as well. So I think I might have some pledges from the leader of the City Council in my back pocket now. We had a really quick but positive conversation. It was really great. Chris kicked off and said, you know, there was a clear recognition of the strong foundations that existed in the city. So this was pre-COVID. There was already that foundation, if you like, which enabled us to be able to move quickly. There was some acknowledgement that pre-pandemic, there was community leaders who were gatekeepers. And so that move away from pedestals and instead creating platforms where more people can come together and co-design and co-produce and deliver stuff that's meaningful. Amjad picked up on, you know, some of those real challenges within some of our BAME communities. The fact that this new model has now been replicated with the work we're doing around health inequality, and Chris Barker was also in our call, and we're looking forward to the next report, which should be next year, and where there is a focus almost preempting around that health, the role that faith communities and the faith sector has in our health communities. So for us, it was all about, okay, how do we the conditions are or were there to start with, how do we not just preserve them but almost propel them? And again, it was much more around trying to keep what we've got but grow it, so not to go back to how things were before. And also, you know, just continue to build on those other networks and those alliances as well. So a real energy and a real passion and desire to keep going in the direction of travel.
Thank you, Carl. That was really helpful. Simon Cartwright, Group 5.
Thank you. Coming on later in the list, you find out other people have said some of the similar things. Like James, we had some questions about the term Derby Way, because there are other cities doing similar things. But we do like to perhaps promote the Better Together as is our logo, and talk about the Better Together Way is a good way of describing it. We were charged with looking at barriers and obstacles. And I think they were best summed up as the danger of busyness, that we just go back to the way we've always done it because we're so busy, and the danger of apathy and needing to get buy-in from those people who are not here and not in these conversations, particularly buy-in in the media. Our media in the city is lousy at giving a good news story. How do we get a good news story out into the media? How do we get it into our MPs, into conversations with government? To get this embedded into ways of doing things. It was great to do it when we had extra resources chucked at us for COVID, but as resources get cut back, do we make sure we remain focused on the new way of doing things?
Thank you, Simon. Can I move to Jeff, please? Jeff Sweeney, Group 6.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think the view of our group was that they're greatly encouraged by the Derby Way, although a recognition that it's embryonic, but it left the group with a sense of optimism. If anything, the areas of improvement is ensuring that whatever the mechanism or the system is going forward, doesn't need a pandemic to get everybody working together around a shared purpose. So if anything, there was a plea to sort of build on the blessing of the pandemic in the sense that it's brought everybody together, and it's been a great antidote to the marginalisation of faith from the public realm. I think in terms of the principles on which the partnership and collaboration should go forward was a sense that that faith needs a platform to come together, as well as a sense of a common good. I think Bahan put it as making faith community centric, not organisation centric. So using faith around the matters of community concern, not what concerns our particular faiths or our particular buildings or particular organisations. I think.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Do you mind if I just move us on in the interest of time? But we know you've recorded the whole discussion. Maruf Hussain.
Okay.
Maruf, your group, final group.
Yes, thank you. I will be very brief. Our group was very, very positive. It came out with a slogan that awe-inspiring in terms of the Derby Way and all to better together. So we were very, very positive in terms of what we've heard today. And briefly going forward, we were hoping that the process is quite slow and bureaucratic. And what we're hoping that is one, that going forward, it will be less bureaucratic and will be less risk averse. But also, we're hoping that it's not going to be not going to be here for a short period of time, but it's going to last much longer than it has been in the past. So it is going to go forward in a much more positive way.
Thank you so much, Ruth, and thank you to everybody for contributing, and thank you to our group leaders for keeping the feedback really concise. So what next? I want to invite you all to think about what pledges you're going to take away from this conversation, and please put them in the chat. It'd be great just to keep a record of those and to hold ourselves accountable to what we're committed to. But here's a chance for some panel members, if you like, just to reflect very briefly on what they've heard today and what they've heard coming out of the groups. What's next? What have we learned today, and what are the key messages and actions that we should take back to our localities? First of all, I'm going to ask Rashida Sheikh, who's chair of Community Action Derby, our voluntary sector organisation. Hello, Rashida. Would you like to offer something first of all, and then I'll go to Maria.
Hello, Peter. Thank you. It has been really interesting to listen through first the initial presentations, but also in the group and the feedback from the group, individual groups as well. I've made a few notes, and some things have really kind of stayed with me today after this webinar is cooperate and collaborate. That's going to stick with me. I'm going to take that back to community action to see how more we are doing it very well, but how more we can do it. Yes, we don't need a pandemic to work together, but that has actually made us work together. So realizing the strength in working together and how we can pull down those fences and build bridges is another thing that's going to stay with me, and I'm going to take it back and make a pledge to save those bridges built. Yeah, that's from my end, Peter.
Thank you very much, Rushita. That's great. Maria, Chief Executive of Derby Homes. Maria, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. I just had a job switching myself off mute. Right, first of all, I'm so glad that Rachel North wasn't available this afternoon, because I actually feel so enthused by everything that's come back from this group. So Rachel's loss was absolutely my gain. What am I taking away? Well, as I said, lots of enthusiasm, because there are so many of us that are committed, and I think that is a great starting point. What I'm going to do, though, is put this across to everybody. I can't remember who it was in the feedback talked about the worry about budgets in April, and will that be something that makes us all crawl back into our shells like we have done previously? What I'm going to go back with is a very strong message that actually we can't afford to not do this. We have to do it. And the fact that we are all under financial pressures makes it more important to work together and be stronger and better together. The other thing that I'm going to take back with me is around what I think is our biggest challenge, and that is culture. Because although there's a lot of us on this call, we're actually a very small part of a very, very wide group. And changing culture is easier said than done. And one of the things that I think that we need to consider, and probably for the local authority to lead the way in this, is to look at secondments into partner organisations, so we can actually immerse ourselves and live and breathe the culture within each other's organisations. That way, I think we will get the collective more quickly.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you again for your presentation earlier.
You're welcome.
Those images. I'm going to ask Chris Baker. Chris, a final comment on future action.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I mean, I think the best way to answer that for me is what I've taken away from today and listening to the Derby Way, which has been very, very impressive and inspiring, is the power of values, the power of relationships, and don't ask for money, ask what is the problem and what are the resources that we all bring to bear on that problem, and then perhaps the money will emerge out of that. So it's a kind of trying to, I think the future lies in totally inverting the question.
I'm going to have to tell my ex to put your ass to pay for a holiday.
Oh, I think that might be an invitation to mute. Could everyone please mute?
Yeah.
I think Peter, Chris Polt has got his hand up.
Chris, yes, I did see. I was just waiting for the sound to die. A quick offer from Chris.
Peter, thank you. I won't be long, but I'm going to make a pledge, and I'm going to make a pledge to learn from the mistakes in the past. At previous times when money's been short, we've cut support for community action and for voluntary groups at our great cost. Fortunately, prior to COVID, they were building back. COVID's brought us back together to build back better. And actually, one lesson learned is that actually it's not always about money. It's about working together. It's about building back together and using the resources. And the faith communities have massive resources, massive volunteers, and so it's not all about money. And the council can't afford, can't throw money at it left, right, and centre. We don't need that. So the message from me, the pledge from me, is to learn from the lessons of the past, and Maria will get a good reception when she comes back with her messages.
Good. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for joining us in your very busy schedule.
I was quite early, Peter, but I was quietly in the background, so
that's excellent.
I heard it all. Thank you.
We're very pleased. Simon Riley, any final comments from Simon?
Thank you for that, Peter. I think, as we've said, we're a city with a series of shared outcomes, shared values, and hopefully developing shared trust. But I might control the money, but it's about relationships and it's about alliances. And we are stronger together, we're better together through what I've heard today. So I'm really encouraged, and I'll support the city in delivering those shared outcomes for the city. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you to our four panelists, as it were, and also to Chris. We're coming right to the end, and it's if I go by the clock on my study wall rather than my wristwatch, it's 4 o'clock. So we've come in on time. So thank you, everybody, for very concise contributions. Thank you for attending. The Multi-Faith Centre will produce a document following this conversation to capture all the key points and remind us of the conversation, and we want to keep in touch with you, please. There's a form to enable us to do that under GDPR on the chat now, if you were able to fill that out before you leave. And we do really hope that we might be able to keep in contact with you. So please give us permission to do so. So I want to thank everybody who's made a significant contribution to this afternoon. That won't surprise you to know that that includes each one of you for attending and contributing so significantly to the conversations in the groups. But thank you to those who have prepared material for this afternoon and presented to us, to Simon and Maria and Chris and Jeff. And I want to say a big thank you to Tim at the William Temple Foundation, who has been handling the technology superbly behind the scenes, and I don't think has made a false move all afternoon. So thank you very much indeed for that, Chris. Now I'm just going to ask my colleague Jeff. Jeff, is there anything else I need to say or do? Have we covered everything before we let people go?
I think we've covered everything, but just really to say, if anybody wants to join us with the Faith Steering Group, do get in touch with me via the Multi-Faith Centre, and I shall put you on the appropriate mailing list with your permission.
Yeah, thank you. And I should have thanked Jazz and Guy and Paul as well for inspiring sort of case studies right at the heart of this conversation. So thank you very much, everybody, for being with us. This is part of a journey for Derby. We hope to keep in touch with everyone. And thank you all again for being part of the conversation. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.